And it's all these years of radio history that has really brought us to where we are now. And it's programs like this that inspire people to go into the sciences, go into engineering, make a lifelong career of this, but not just that, make a really good life for themselves because of the friendships and the relationships that people build by having a common interest. So it's really, really important. So thank you very much. Okay, so next, as I mentioned last night, the Ham-Sci Collective aims to bring together the amateur radio community and the professional space science community. And so each year, I'd like to invite someone from each of those communities to really address the other community and tell that other community what they're about and how we can help each other. So this year, from the amateur radio community, we have invited Carl Luetzelschwab, K9LA, and he's going to give the tutorial Ham Radio for Space Scientists. Carl started his radio career as a shortwave listener in the late 1950s and received his novice license, WN9 AVT, in October 1961. He selected K9LA in 1977, and he enjoys propagation, DX engine DXing, he's at the top of the honor roll, contesting, he was NCJ editor from 2002 through 2007, playing with antennas, and fixing and using vintage equipment. Carl is a graduate of Purdue University with a bachelor's in 1969, master's electrical engineering in 1972, and worked for Motorola, Magnavox Raytheon as an RF design engineer, mostly designing solid-state RF power amplifiers. He retired in October 2013, and he and his wife Vicky, AE9YL, reside in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and enjoyed traveling, which included de-expeditions to Syria, Market Reef, and numerous trips to the Cayman Islands. Carl is currently the ARRL Central Division Vice Director. He has received the Bill Orr W6 SAI Technical Writing Award, the Yasmy Foundation Excellence Award, and the Indiana Radio Club Council Technical Excellence Award. So I'd like to welcome Carl Luetzelschwab.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who had a hand in organizing this workshop. It was great, and I'm sure it's going to be great the rest of the day. As Nathaniel mentioned, we live in Fort Wayne. I'm a Hoosier by birth, but I redeemed myself. I married a Buckeye. So everybody should be happy. And Vicki would have loved to have been here, but she's a science teacher at the local elementary Catholic school, so she has trouble traveling during the school year. But she would have loved to have been here because she's really interested in all this stuff. Phil wanted me to talk about the MDSR and how it discovered Planet X, but but unfortunately Nathaniel said I had to talk about this, so that's what we're going to talk about. Darn. I'm licensed in 61, so cycle 25 will be my 7th solar cycle. And I just want everybody to know that I accurately predicted that cycle 24 would have sunspots. Okay. That was a real tough one, let me tell you. 25? But we have had at least one sunspot from 25, so I think that's okay. So, are there any hams in the audience? Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I'm kind of like preaching to the choir here, but there's some history that I think will be maybe new to some people, so we'll go over that. That's what we're going to talk about real quick, and I'm going to try and get back on track so Larissa gets her full time, because she's got some pretty interesting stuff, at least in my mind, and I'm sure it's going to be great for everyone else. And I just discovered that this thing also has a shock option. It's tied to the lights. So, whatever. Okay, the early years of amateur radio. After Marconi did his feat in 1901, many private radio operators got on, built their spark transmitters, but of course, we started receiving lots of complaints because of the bandwidth of spark. Reach down, there we go. So the Radio Act of 1912 kind of, they thought they did it to us. Must be licensed, limited to 1 kilowatt. No more operation in the prime wavelengths, 1,000 to 200 meters. We had to go to shorter than 200 meters. Well, we had a good attitude about that. We'll show them, and we certainly did, didn't we? Yeah. So what did hams offer back then? Well, they offered radio stations. If you're going to do radio research, it's kind of helpful to have a radio station, I think. We also had a basic understanding of radio and propagation, so that helped. Didn't have to do a lot of training if someone asked for our expertise. We had large numbers. Well, 46,000 back then isn't large now, but I think we're up to around 800,000 in the U.S. at least. And of course, we had wide geographic coverage, not just domestic, but also overseas. So we were a good resource to help understand this propagation stuff. Back then, I think we were considered observers. Scientists were considered to be theorists. But of course, just like back then, we have scientists who are hams and hams who are scientists. So there's a blurred line right there. Today, our bands, you probably know, they go from 2,200 meters, 137 kilohertz, all the way up to, gigahertz type stuff, way up there. Approximately 800,000 hams in the U.S., and I've seen some various estimates of how many are in the world, but it's definitely over 1 million more. So we're everywhere. Pop quiz. What 1938 movie did that come from? No. Kind of that genre. It's Nancy Drew Detective. Okay, and that's Bonita Granville. And her boy, he wasn't the boyfriend, he was the boyfriend, had a station, W8YZR, which wasn't in the call book at the time, so at least they kind of covered everybody getting a hold of that guy. All right. So what have we contributed to propagation type studies? Well, the first major one was when XE1KE and LU6DO had a QSO on 50 megahertz. And it shouldn't have happened because the MUF was just too low. And that led to the discovery of transequatorial propagation. ZE2JV explained how that happened in December '59. Now, ZE is the old Southern Rhodesia. It's now Z2 Zimbabwe. And 5B4 Whiskey Radio, Cyprus, had a nice picture of the TEP mechanism, and that's it on the side there. Normal F2 was via 2 hops, but transequatorial propagation was one long hop across the equatorial the geomagnetic equator. Long delayed echoes. Long delayed echoes. Long delayed echoes. Oh, okay. Well, finally you got it. I was gonna. Jeez, it's a tough crowd there, Nathaniel. Let me tell you. First reported on PJCC in Eindhoven, the Netherlands, in 1927, and Oswald Villard. Anybody familiar with him? He was a professor at Stanford, the research lab out there, and he had an article in May '69 QST. Solicited observations from other stations. Many reports followed, and I think there are 2 explanations. Larissa and I kind of talked about this on Skype before the meeting. One is magnetospheric ducting by LA3ZA, and the other one is, as the electromagnetic wave approaches the plasma frequency, as it's going up, the group velocity slows down. So, there's some theories out there. This would be interesting to understand, but it really doesn't add any practical operating knowledge. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Makes you really think about stuff. Bob Rose, K6GKU, introduced Minimuff. That was the first propagation prediction program that could be run on a PC. 80 whole basic programming steps to describe the ionosphere, right? Over solar cycle, time, months, and everything. Fit on a TI-59 calculator. I think that was the one that had the little magnetic strip. You could program it, yep. Or a TRS-80. But that was the first step that got hams into propagation predictions other than doing them manually. How many remember the ionospheric predictions that Boulder used to put out? They came out every month and predicted what the ionosphere would look like 3 months in advance. Then they consolidated all that into 3 volumes, smooth sunspot number 10, 100, and I think 150 for the very high. But it sure took a lot of the manual effort out of propagation predictions. De-expeditions. They are a wonderful collection of QSOs from around the world. For example, a 2-week expedition can generate tens of thousands of QSOs. And I'm sure the Bouvet Island, that's the ship that's headed there now with the hams, they plan to stay 2, maybe 3 weeks. That's going to be great propagation data. You have to sift through a lot of it, but it's there. The FT5ZMD expedition to Amsterdam Island in 2014, I got a hold of their logs, and there was lots of reports of skewed paths on 28 megahertz. And knowing where each end pointed their antennas and looking at great circle paths and all that, and you could figure out kind of where the skew point was that joined two great circle paths to provide the MUF that was needed to be on 28 megahertz. So the expeditions can contribute a lot to propagation. Okay, collaboration with scientists. The first effort I'm aware of was 1920. Ward mentioned it last night. It was the fading tests because radio was kind of new and signals faded. So what was going on? So the Bureau of Standards asked hams to listen to certain transmissions. And on the bottom there on the left is 1AW. We didn't have the prefix W or K yet. 1AW in Hartford transmitting, and 2OE in New York, and 9ZJ in Indy recorded the signal strength. And there on the right is the standard form that they use. So early on, people were aware that hams are out there and they could help trying to understand some stuff. You know, this is quite crude in terms of nowadays, but you got to start somewhere, and I'm sure 100 years from now, people will think what we're doing right now is kind of crude. I don't know. We also participated in the International Geophysical Year back in 57 and 58. It was kind of tied to the discovery of TEP earlier, and people had a good feeling about hams. Collected reports of possible ionospheric propagation on 2.6 and 220 megahertz. Generated nearly 300,000 individual reports from 600 observers in 50 countries. Of course, you gotta make sure the observations are good. You know, if you don't have the time and all, you know, we can screw it up, but there's a lot of good that comes out of it. Showed lots of sporadic E data and how the ionized clouds moved. So that was a major contribution. I think we've talked about the reverse beacon network and also WhisperNet, so I won't cover that too much. One of the things you can also do with reverse beacon is compare signal strengths between 2 stations. This is K3LR in western Pennsylvania, W3LPL in Maryland. On 40-meter spots to a station in Germany, you can compare and see who's the bigger guy. Sometimes it was W3LPL, sometimes it was K3LR. So those guys can build their station and say, well, I gotta beat K3LRs. I want to put up more antennas or something. A lot of interesting stuff with that. And again, the WhisperNet, and I've just referenced 2 of Nathaniel's works, Nathaniel and others, about using all this for propagation studies. vast tools. There's some other ones out there too. The IARU, International Amateur Radio Union, in conjunction with the Northern Cal DX Foundation, runs beacons on 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. There are 18 in the world. They each transferred for 10 seconds. So in 3 minutes on any band, you can tell what worldwide propagation is. Now, VE3NA came up with what's called the Pharos Software. What it does is records all that. You back out the delay through your receiver. You know when the station starts transmitting, so you can time how long it took the signal to get there. What you can see is a nice plot of on 15 meters. An Italian station was listening to OA4B beacon in Peru. And there were times when long path was working. There were times when short path. But what really got interesting is some in-between times. And more than likely, it was some kind of skewed path that allowed, two great circle paths connected together at a skew point that gave the overall about 62 millisecond time delay. So, another pop quiz. What's the technical term for how often you go to a restaurant to eat a Greek sandwich? We ought to know this. Oh, shoot. Gyro frequency, that's right. Yeah. Oh, that's terrible. Oh, okay. Oh, man, that's terrible. Okay. Okay, here's what I think I'd like to see, and I think a lot of hams would like to see. And it's a lot of what we've talked about already. There was a paper in, in 2001 by Rishbeth and Mendilo. Rishbeth is, I think people probably know him. He's done a lot of, modeling of the various regions of the ionosphere. But they took a whole, all the ionoson data from late 50s to 2000 or so, and went through it and put it into 3 buckets. Was the variability of the ionosphere due to solar radiation? Was it due to geomagnetic field type stuff? Or was it due to events in the lower atmosphere coupling up to the ionosphere? And that's really kind of interesting. We understand the solar radiation very well. I think we have a decent handle on geomagnetic field activity, and that's through the storm model. What it does is takes the last 11 K indices and predicts the change in FO2 because of how the storm developed. So that could be inputted into propagation prediction programs probably. Right now, if a propagation prediction program has a K index input, it's a single K index, which it's kind of a far-reaching assumption, let's say. So what the result of all this is our propagation predictions, at least for available for hams, use a monthly median model of the ionosphere. In other words, our understanding of the ionosphere is statistical over a month's time frame. But of course, everybody wants to know, well, what's happening right now? Well, I'm sure the military and all that, they can assimilate ionoson data and total electron content and bring their models more up to date in the short term, but we're still kind of stuck with monthly median models. So I think it'd be great if we understood all the variability, and a lot of it, I think, is events in the lower atmosphere coupling up to the ionosphere, and that's fascinating, and I think Larissa is going to talk about that. How big does an event need to be to generate an atmospheric gravity wave? How big does an atmospheric gravity wave need to be to couple up to the ionosphere? Does it couple up just to the E region? Does it couple up to the F2 region? And what kind of parameter would you use to describe it? For solar radiation, we got sunspots, solar flux, we got EUV. For geomagnetic field activity, basically the A and K indices. But there's no parameter yet for these events in the lower atmosphere. But we're going to probably figure it out someday. That kind of brings me down to the D region. Unintended, of course. You know, our understanding of the D region is from rocket flights, incoherent scatter radar, stuff like that, that is not continuous monitoring. So we don't understand a lot. It'd be good to understand that, I think. Then on the other hand, if we knew how everything worked, it wouldn't be any fun anymore. There wouldn't be any excitement. So kind of glad that we haven't figured it out yet. But it's fun to think about because it's a big chemistry set up there down in the D region. It's, you know, you got negative ions and, oh, geez. Okay, a big zoo up there. So we've contributed a lot to science. Not only propagation, but radio design, antenna design, waveform design, etc. I'm working on a digital CW waveform. Oh, wait, that doesn't make sense. Oh, okay. Think about that. Ward showed the picture. This is the book that kind of describes the history of amateur radio contributing to science. Ward was the editor of this book. Jim, WA3FET, was a contributor. I was a contributor, and there were about 5 or 6 more. It's a great book. It's got a lot of good, interesting stuff in it. And I'm sure we're going to continue contributing to science in the future. It's good to see all the youth here. Yeah, thumbs up for that. And as Nathaniel said, if you need, and I'll keep this kind of quiet, if you need some money laundered, just see me because I'm the director of Vice for the Central Division. Oh, wait, no, I'm the Vice Director. Oh, shoot, okay, forget that. Don't listen to that. So that's all I had. Any questions? Yes, Ward. There might, anybody know of anything? You know, yeah. Yeah, maybe, you know, like tropospheric, you know, there's ducting forecasts based on weather. Maybe there'll be something based on thunderstorm activity, but I don't think there's any yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I echo what Phil said yesterday. You can get a lot of fun out trying to figure out what happened. Yeah. Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
I wonder if you could comment a little bit on the history of hams and their involvement with Sputnik and how that related to early understanding of propagation modeling. Do you have any historical insights on that, or
not really?
Else? Okay.
Is there something in the book here, Ward, about Sputnik? Yeah. Yeah.
I can say a quick word on that because actually we had some Cleveland involvement. Sputnik launched in the International Geophysics Year. It was a surprise event, though. Most of what the world communities did was well announced. This one wasn't. The Air Force scrambled to figure out how to do all the Doppler shift monitoring and contacted every amateur radio club there was. Bob Leskovic, our manager of the club, along with Jim back in the day, was a high school student at the time. St. Edward's here in town, his radio club was one of the ones contacted. St. Joseph, I'm sorry. Another high school in town, not St. Edward's, St. Joseph. I apologize. Okay, anyway, they stayed up 24 hours a day for a good couple of weeks, monitoring Doppler shift. That was the main amateur radio contribution to that, which indirectly led to Project Transit and the GPS system.
All I can say is I listened on my NC60 receiver for Sputnik. I don't think I ever heard it. I'm not sure I knew when it was coming on. You know, who? Yeah. 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 Yes. Yeah. Sputnik. Yeah.
So, sort of like satellite. Yeah. Companion.
Yes. Oh, man. Yeah, I'm glad our government doesn't do that anymore, huh? Did I say that? Uh-oh. Yeah, right.
All right, and it's time for the Case Amateur Radio Club to embarrass the speaker again. I have it on good authority that I'm sorry, was there another question? I have it on good authority that in some frou-frou city like New York or Boston or Chicago, there's something like a Mary Kay convention going on now where the speaker's gifts are things like diamond rings and pink Cadillacs. That's right. It's not the kind of speaker's gift that a gritty industrial city like Cleveland gives to a speaker at something like Hamsci. So permit me to present to you from the WADDU treasure box.
Oh, boy.
This little cardboard box.
Okay.
Yeah. Which may not look like much, but this is a 1950 Army Signal Corps radiosonde.
Oh, all right.
It's a two-vacuum tube 400 megahertz transmitter that was designed to be exceedingly light and go up a couple times a day on a weather balloon. Probably the batteries weighed more than that did. It has the most amazing kludge of a transmission line capacitor for setting frequency that I've ever seen in my entire life. But it does report altitude and temperature. I think the issue was that in the 1950s, the Army Signal Corps realized that radio amateurs were going to need accurate information about temperature inversion for 2-meter contacts. And then incidentally, it was going to be of use in high-altitude jet transport research for identifying the tropopause in the stratosphere. But really, temperature inversions on 2 meters are really very cool. And we
thank you.
Hope that you enjoy having this. When you get it set up to make at least a CW contact on 440, please let us know, and we will do that.
That's where they were, up at 400 megahertz.
That's right. So thank you very much.
Well,
we appreciate your being.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Carl. I really appreciate it.